Coalesce podcast. My name's Grant.
And I'm Meg.
And today we're going to just do no code, but we're just going to talk about some of the auth options that you have in Coalesce. And this is really not really Coalesce stuff, but more just ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core and some of the EF stuff, and just kind of how we can pull those things together. So we're just going to go through, I have a couple of slides here, just kind of look at those things. So let's go ahead and take a look at those things and kind of get an idea of what you can do. So we're just talking about some auth options. So from this perspective, we really have three primary ways. And again, there's lots of different options, and I'm sure there's many, many more things, but we're just trying to cover kind of the high level ones that we see are the ones that are the most common. So, and all these can actually be combined together. You can use these with more or less kind of having to fit them together, but some of these fit together really nicely. So as far as external accounts go, you have OpenID Connect, which is going to do your Enter ID, your Microsoft Live, your Facebook, and your Google. Those are going to come out of the box. You can also write other ones if you want to, and if there's other providers with NuGet packages, you can pull those things in. So that's where you're going to go out and auth with, let's say, for example, Facebook, and do that, get your credentials back, and then basically let Facebook handle storing the password or Google handle storing the password. So that's one option. Second option is what used to be like local Windows accounts, right? So it's on your local machine, or it's like an AAD thing, or if you're federated with Enter ID or Azure Active Directory, as it used to be called, you can do that as well. So that's just kind of that single sign-on. It just sends the credentials along with it. This is becoming something that we're not seeing used very often. It's not as common anymore. In some enterprise environments, we still do see this because you have systems that are logged in, and they can just use this local account to get there. So it is definitely an option in some cases, but we're not seeing it as often, especially with obviously not with like commercial apps that are on the internet. That just really doesn't happen very often. And then individual accounts, and this is one of the used to be probably one of the most popular options, where you just literally store using the ASP.NET identity or some other scheme if you want to. Your accounts inside of your database. And so that would be, you have a username and a password that's hashed and all the things that you need for storing an account locally. And then you probably have a collection of roles and things like that. And so ASP.NET Identity is a great way to do that if you're going to choose that particular way. I would not recommend kind of rolling your own if the ASP.NET stuff will work for you. So, hey, Meg, do you have anything to add on that? Did I miss any high points or things that are worth tossing in?
I think the main thing here is that there's no real one correct answer. It really depends on your app too, and what you think your users would expect.
Right.
For example, if you're like making a website and it's supposed to be for the public, it's maybe a little unexpected to have only a Microsoft account to log in, or have to have a Windows account to log in, and individual accounts may be more the correct answer, or even a combination of individual accounts and external accounts, so that users have lots of options for their login. Some people don't feel comfortable using Gmail to log in with things. Some people don't feel comfortable making individual accounts to log into things. So it really is it's a combination of the one that makes the most sense for your security, but also what makes most sense for your user base.
Right, absolutely. And you see, oftentimes you'll see a combination of external accounts and individual accounts. So they would have the ability to log in with Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and then, or maybe Apple even. And then you could also see, hey, make your own account with an email and a password. So those are also things you could see done. And you may see both. I mean, and there's other more complicated ways you can do these accounts as well. So tons of options there, but really it's about finding the thing that meets your security requirements and really meets the expectations of your users, because I think all of these are fairly secure. It's just a matter of finding the right one for you.
Yep.
All right, so the next question is like, how do these actually work, and what are the different options for getting them to work? And so some of these have better fits for some of these technologies, but in general, you can kind of do some mixing and matching here. Not all mixing and matching, but some mixing and matching. And so the first option is cookies. And this is probably, aside from the clear username and password submitted in clear text, one of the older ways of doing it, but older doesn't necessarily mean worse, where cookies are things that are stored in the browser. So what happens is I log in, cookies get attached and sent back by the server to the browser, which contain information about the user that then gets sent back with every request. So as I make a request, the cookies get sent back. The server then knows, hey, this is this particular user, and this user may have these rights, or it can work a few different ways, but that's generally the way these cookies work. And so if you want to use those, there can be some. The nice thing is they're stored in the browser. They work effectively transparently, and with ASP.NET Core, this can kind of just work essentially right out of the box, really simply. There are some kind of security concerns, and this is around essentially if I go to a site and then it calls another site and you could potentially attach those cookies, although browsers these days are pretty good at not doing those. And there's this process called pre-flight and cross-origin requests, like CORS requests, that the server can kind of help with a little bit, but really this is on the browser side. It's about the browser not attaching those cookies. And so you really have to trust your browser, which I think all the modern commonly used browsers are pretty good at this. So the other downside is they can be kind of tricky to use when you want to just make API calls, because if you want to make an API call, you're essentially doing a login, but then you need to get something back that you can then attach to every other call. And the browser would just attach these cookies for you. And if you're not using a browser, if you're just making the calls, then you have to attach those yourself. And so cookies can just be a little bit trickier to attach and get everything all right, although it's totally possible, and people do this all the time. So, Meg, do you have anything else to add to cookies?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sums it up. That they're typically used for managing your sessions and kind of your persistent logins across your typical websites. It'll be interesting to look at cookies, and then when you get into JWTs, there they definitely serve different roles. So we should, yeah.
Yeah, so JWT works slightly differently, and what happens here instead is they're attached. And so what happens is I log in, and I get this token back, right? And this is really JWTs. There's a lot of different kinds of tokens. I probably should have labeled this just tokens. And you can do this. You get a token back, and that token can be one of two types. You can either have opaque tokens or transparent tokens. And what's more common is really the transparent token, which means that I can open up that token and look at the claims inside of it. And so that token essentially gets a little encrypted piece there to show that it hasn't been changed. And so the server does that, hands it back to the client. And then I can hand that back to the server. Now, if I modify anything inside that token, the server knows, because it does the hash doesn't match, right? Which is done with an encryption key. And so this allows me to see things like, what roles is this user a part of? And so you can actually use that JWT to get information about what to show to the client. Now, you can also use, like if you're using cookies, which you can't necessarily see, you can make a call that says, hey, just hand me back what the user can do. And so you could do that as well. Just have an endpoint that gives you that piece of information. So you can either look into a transparent JWT, or I can go ahead and make an API call that just hands me back an object that says, hey, this is what the user can accomplish. And so that way I can hide or show different user interface elements as appropriate. So, well, with that in mind, they can become a little bit bloated if you try to put everything in there. We've worked with organizations that have literally a person might have 500 different roles. And so this could be a hassle, especially if you're automatically loading up the roles based on something like Enter ID or something like that. They can be somewhat harder. Go ahead, Meg.
Oh, well, I just want to say too, a key difference to remember with the cookies and JWTs before we get too far away from cookies is cookies are stateful and JWTs are stateless. And that is a very key difference in when you would want to use them too. But the stateful cookies, you can keep your login session for a longer period of time. With JWTs, they're stateless. It's great for API calls, but it doesn't kind of save that information for each request. So you end up getting stale JWTs after a while too. And that's sometimes annoying to manage.
Yeah, and the typical way that would happen is you get your JWT, you'd be holding it on your client, you then send it back to the server, and there's this idea that since you can, if it's transparent, you can see it, you can do this refresh process too, where you get new JWTs back as they get to as they reach some kind of an expiration. Like let's say you get halfway to expiration, and you would have a a regular token, an auth token, and then a refresh token. So there's really using these things for long running sessions and things like that can get kind of complicated. But this is really the way that we're seeing a lot of things like logging in from a mobile app or something like that. Using these JWTs seems to be the way, because all those calls aren't really made in a browser. And so you can just literally just attach these as a header, boom, send them back, and you're good to go. And this is really, when you think about the headless API calls or even headed API calls, where you have some kind of a browser, or not a browser, but an app or something like that. Those would be a really good option for that. So anything else to add, Meg?
I think that's it.
And then hybrid is really, you get the best of both worlds. Like, so you could have cookies for your regular stuff, which makes it kind of easy and transparent. And then you have JWTs for all your API calls. And if you have a mobile app or anything like that, the JWTs can really work for that piece. So the bad part about that is then you have two stacks, right? And you're having to kind of make sure that those two things stay in alignment, that you have the same kind of roles available, so you don't like add something in one spot and not add it in another spot. And so then your auth doesn't work because of how you've set up some things. So anyway, I think that basically covers the different ways you can do auth. We want to kind of start diving in over the next several episodes into like how you actually get this set up. And so to go through the process of setting up Coalesce with some of these different auth mechanisms. So Meg, anything else to say?
No, I mean, I think that the main one that we're going to kind of explore is the individual accounts. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and put some individual accounts on. We're actually looking to release a new template for Coalesce that has a number of these baked in automatically, so that you can just turn on some various things and you'll get these things right out of the box. Because if you're not familiar with how the security pieces work in ASP.NET, it can be kind of confusing trying to get all the orders right and trying to figure out how exactly to set up these different pieces. And some of these are fairly tricky. Like if you're going to go ahead and use accounts from Facebook or something like that, trying to get all those linkages correct and then know how to go into the Facebook side and set up all the redirect URLs and things like that. Although you will still have to do that. That's something that Coalesce can't do for you. Or if you wanted to do individual accounts and kind of combine those, but you want to have a custom login page, those are things that because they come right out of the DLLs for identity, if you want to customize those, there's several steps you have to go through. And then if you wanted to do some other ways you can log in with respect to, like, if you want to use cookies, but you don't want to just do page navigations, trying to get those things kind of figured out. It can be just something that is not ground that people write. It's not code you write all the time, and so you're not oftentimes super familiar with that.
But you always want it in your app. So
you always want it in your apps, right? So if we could say, hey, if we can give you some code out of the box to make that happen. So not out yet, but I think with Coalesce 5, those things are going to release. So anyway, I think that does it for today. So until next time, keep writing awesome Coalesce apps.
I think so.